Fab. Well, delighted to say we've reached the top of the hour, and would love to welcome everyone back to our webinar program. For today's webinar, Performance Management, Best Practices for Agents, Leaders and Managers. I'm Rachel and I'm going to be your webinar chairperson today, and delighted to welcome a brilliant panel of experts for this webinar. Welcome back, Gary Gormley from Fab Solutions.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here again, Rachel.
Fab. And for people who missed your introduction, would you like to share a bit about yourself?
Yep, so I'm Gary Gormley. I run Fab Solutions, which is a contact center-based consultancy. We look at customer experience through the lens of people, process, leadership, and technology to help you improve the overall experience that's happening in your contact center.
Brilliant. Well, I was going to say Fab again. So, you know, you've done well with your brand.
You can keep plugging the business if you like, Rachel. I'm not...
Great. I'm going to have to stop saying Fab. So also delighted to welcome back Natalie Calvert from CX High Performance. Welcome back, Natalie.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, everybody out there. Nice to see everybody here today.
Great. And would you like to share a bit about who you are as well?
Yeah, so I'm Natalie Calvert. I run CX High Performance. We specialize in bringing together customer experience and employee experience to deliver greater business performance. But we do that around high performance rather than just average performance. And I'm going to come on and talk about that in a little while.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. And delighted to welcome to his first webinar with us, Paul Turner from Genesis. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, good to be here. Hello, everybody.
And would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name is Paul Turner. I'm the innovation lead for workforce engagement here in Genesis in EMEA. Been in this industry since 1996, working with organisations around these kind of challenges. So looking forward to the conversations today.
Great. We're delighted to have you on board and all our panel, actually. So just a bit of housekeeping to say we are taking a recording of today's webinar, and that will be available later on this afternoon on callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. So today we are running our discussion in our chat room. I can see we've got 60 people in our chat room so far, so less than half the people who are already online. So if you want to join in the chat, I would suggest it's a good place to be, callcenterhelper.com/chat. It is in a separate window, so you will need to put it either side by side, or I've got it in my, got a big screen in, on my laptop. Or you can always put it onto your mobile phone, which I know a lot of people like to do. Few added bonuses of being in the chat room is that you can download a copy of our speakers' slides. Lots of information there, so I definitely recommend doing that. And also got everyone's LinkedIn details so you can connect with them afterwards. And also later on, we will be coming to our very favourite quiz. And the buttons to be able to take part are in our chat room. Another reason to be in our chat room is that we are running our bottle of champagne, box of chocolates, or even an Amazon gift card for the best tip. You just need to write #question if you'd like to ask our panel a question, or #tip to share your top tips for performance management. So before I hand over the reins, as it were, to Gary, I'm going to ask a quick poll, which is, what challenges do you face in improving quality monitoring and performance management? So let me just launch that. So it's multiple choice, so you can tick more than one. So the options are measuring the right things, we're too busy, low trust in the process, team leaders need better skills, technology won't let me, or no technology. Gary, what do you think? If I'm gonna, you know, be a betting person, where do you think?
Well, it could be any one of those things, but I'm going to put my money on measuring the right things. It feels like family fortunes, doesn't it? I feel they said.
Paul, would you agree?
I think call centres are far too busy, and that's probably the biggest obstacle.
Fab, let's see, and I'm going to share the results. So actually you both got the top two. So it went measuring the right things, 57%, 45% we're too busy, 37% team leaders need better skills, 17% technology won't let me, 12% low trust in the process, and 4% saying no technology. So Gary, thoughts on that?
And you know, it doesn't surprise me. I think Paul hit the top with the other one in terms of we're too busy. So I think the measuring the right things and understanding what's important is a real skill in itself, and then finding the capacity and the time to do that. We need to make more time for team leaders to manage people and manage the process. So.
Isn't that interesting? Because both of those come down to team leader skills, don't they?
Yeah.
When you kind of analyze those two, you put it all together, that's actually being too busy or measuring the wrong things is about not having the skill to do it. It's an interesting one.
There we go. So Gary, I think it's perfect opportunity to hand over to you. So I will stop sharing and...
Brilliant. So this is where technology will either embrace me or not. So can everybody see my screen?
We can, yes.
Wonderful. So thanks very much for letting me join today. And I'm going to talk about performance management and share some practical hints and tips about how we can manage people more effectively. I think as leaders and as managers, sometimes we can get entrenched in the detail, and sometimes we just need to lift ourselves up and think about what we're trying to do in terms of developing our people and creating structure and process to help us manage them more effectively, to get the most out of them. And when I look at performance management, and I think when we talk about performance management, we instantly, our mind tends to go to the negative. We're trying to manage somebody out of the business, or we're trying to put them on a performance development plan. So I talk about there being two aspects of performance management, if you like. So we've got, on one hand, our job there is to engage, inspire, and lead people. That's what performance management means to me. There is an alternative, which we've got that transactional level of performance management. We've got that reactive performance management, or we use performance management to control and influence behaviors. And if we look at how some of those things pan out, and some of the outcomes of some of those conversations, in a positive performance management situation, we're discussing important behaviors that matter and that can make a difference. We're showing to our teams and our people that we care about their problems, we care about the challenges, we care about their performance, and we're supportive in helping them either improve, excel, or just be better all around positive performance. And then obviously we want to use that as an opportunity to share success, challenge behaviors where we need to challenge behaviors, and build developmental actions that will help everybody be better, including the business. So there's a strong business ROI in performance management. On the flip side of that, we can see performance management, and quite often these conversations become about the number. It becomes about transactional conversations, and you rock up into your one-to-one with your piece of paper that you need to complete, or the form that you need to fill in, and it's very much on your agenda rather than your employees' agenda and your team members' agenda. We use PIPs to drive and change performance, and we talk about performance improvement plans over performance development plans. So that drives a negative culture, and it can mean that we don't use coaching tools or feedback tools in a way that can drive positive changes in performance. And ultimately, we can be guilty. I think we can all probably say that at some point we've been guilty of using performance management apps to fast track people out of the business. And that creates a negative culture. It creates a spiral where we drive higher levels of attrition, and it puts a lot of pressure on your people, and it puts a lot of pressure on your team leaders. So if we look at performance management and behavior, they are intrinsically linked. How we perform as individuals, we're all come in different shapes and sizes. We all have different challenges. Some of those issues and those challenges are very visible. Some of them are a little bit deeper and more connected to what's happening at home or in their personal lives, which doesn't always manifest in the right way. So we need to understand how performance differs and why. And we need to look at our people on a page and understand how actually, if we plotted all our people out into all the different functional areas or all the different functions of performance, and we looked at behaviors, and we looked at attitudes and skill, and we looked at performance, where do our people sit down? So if we had an opportunity to map all of our teams onto a page, where would they feature on some of these dashboards? So if we looked at low levels of performance but great attitude, what do we do with those people? How do we nurture and develop that talent so that they become high performers with great attitude, and we're moving them into the box on the right hand side? And what do we actually do with people that are in that high performance box that've got great attitudes? Because those are the risks of people, that they might stagnate and they might move into a different box and start to kind of feel disengaged. And then we've got people who perform really, really well, but they've got a stinking attitude. And how do we manage and how do we tackle some of those conversations versus the people that have got poor attitudes and poor performance? And there's different ways of tackling and approaching some of those conversations. And we have to look, therefore, at the root cause of some of those behaviors. And we have to look at how we can start to flex our leadership skills and our leadership activities that help us tackle some of those issues. So we've got behaviors, we've got knowledge, and we've got skill. And we need to think about, when we're looking at plotting all our people on that quadrant that we just saw on the last sector, is what are some of the drivers? What are some of the root causes of some of the issues that we're seeing within our teams? And how do we understand if it's a behavioral issue, if it's a knowledge gap, if it's a skills issue? So we have to really think about how we start to support our colleagues and make sure that they're being treated and developed in the right way. So we look at that in 4 different ways. So we look at how we can start to think about the directive behavior. So we've got behaviors going along the bottom there versus supportive behaviors going along the top. And we start to think about, how do we start to think based on the approach that we've got on that previous page? What do we need to do as a leader? Do we need to show more directive action and kind of be very prescriptive about what we're doing? Or do we start to give them a little bit of rope and a little bit less direction, if you like, but more supportive skills to get them to start to think about how they might approach a specific task or a specific topic or their own performance? And then we start to move into the side where people are becoming more self-sustaining. We're starting to think about, actually, you've got the skill, you've got the knowledge, it could be a behavioral thing. So we have to empower you to be more, to take more risks, to take more ownership, to take more accountability of your own performance. Ultimately moving people into a position where they require minimal supervision, they're great at the job, and actually we're starting to nurture them into potential future leadership roles. And those conversations can be quite challenging sometimes. So we have to think about how we give that feedback and how we provide that coaching support and how we provide that level of supervision that is going to help them drive and have those next best conversations. So what I've done on the next slide is created a little feedback model called Boost, which helps us understand a little bit around how we can balance those conversations and how we can start to approach conversations a little bit more objectively, and give us some framework in which to sit down and have a balanced conversation about performance and start to think about, are those positive behaviors, and is it a behavior that we want to support and encourage, or are they behaviors that potentially we want to stamp out? So if we look at the feedback model that I've attached on this side, the first one that we've got is balanced. So we want the conversation to be a little bit balanced. We want to understand what went well with that, with performance. We want to understand what we think could be better, or what needs to stop if it's a behavioral thing or an attitudinal thing that potentially has a negative consequence to performance. Then we look at how much we observe that behavior. So how much time are we actually spending observing our people in the work, and how are we making sure that what they're doing is the right thing? So what did you specifically see? When you're listening to calls, what is it that you were listening out for? What did you hear? And what specifically did the agent say or do when they were on a call or in a particular scenario that could have gone better or could have been relayed to the customer in a slightly different way that might have more of an impact? And at the same time with that, we need to be objective in some of the things that we're saying. So try and take away some of the emotion. Quite often, I mean, I've been there where I've listened to a call, I've winced, and then when I've given that feedback, it's written all over my face that wasn't a good call. So immediately the agent is on the defensive. So let's try and take away some of the emotion that sits with some of the calls and some of the experiences that we listen to, or the anger that we might have because I've told you this once, I've told you this twice, and actually you're still not listening to it. So if we remove some of that and be objective in the process, focusing less on feelings and more about the facts and information, we can give a really objective view about how performance is panning out and how we can improve some of that, which then leads on to specificity. So we need to be really clear. Say that 5 times fast. So we've got to be really clear on the information that we're giving, again, being factual with that information and testing, understanding, has the person taken all the information in that I'm giving them, and do they understand, and can they internalize it in a way that's going to help them take the action and implement the change that we want to see in their overall performance? which then leads on to timeliness. So we want to make sure, when do we expect the agent or the person that we're giving this feedback to actually start implementing those actions? Is it immediate? Is it in the next call? Is it in the next review? When are you expecting to see that? And potentially, if they're sitting on that information, avoid it. Let's grab the bull by the horns. Don't procrastinate, and let's just do what we need to do, and then let's get it done. And then finally, of course, actions are only actions if they've got a deadline attached to them. So make sure that we're setting actions, guidelines, dates, plans, and updates. And when do you expect to have that update back? So I'm hoping that as a framework, this can work really well for people, and you can use it in your calls, and you can use it in your side-by-side discussions to help with some of your coaching conversations to ultimately do what we want, which is to drive performance and avoid any of those potential negative conversations that we might have had previously. So thank you very much. Hope that's been useful, and I'll leave it there. I'll hand it back to Rachel.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Gary. I just want to get everyone to put into the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about Gary's presentation? Brilliant. I really enjoyed, hearing my key takeaways were that it's not just a one-to-one conversation, it's not just ticking a box, that, you really have to think about what's important when looking at performance management. It's not always a way of sharing the negatives. It can be, showing you care and ability to support, sharing success and challenges and things. And also, different people have different needs and different performance abilities. So it's about identifying those. And, definitely think the key takeaway was your boost model. I think people were asking where they could download it. It is available in the chat room to download. Brilliant thing, and lots of questions coming through. So I will start sharing some of those. So Alex said, frequent reviews are important, but be careful to ensure you don't expect changes every week. Many improvements can take time, so be realistic and adapt your approach when necessary. Yeah, Gary, you're nodding along.
Yeah, really great point there. You've got to give people time to embed the change.
Fab. So Steve sent in a tip. Integrating performance management with gamification encourages healthy competition between agents and drives up standards. Paul, I think they've already looked into your slides.
Yeah, definitely. And I strongly agree. If you've got to make it fun as well as focused. So gamification does that.
Fab. And we will be coming to your presentation soon to share a bit more. So Lindsay said, being consistent when you set a review schedule creates an easier process for the reviewee. It lowers the fear factor, knowing it's happening regularly and not an attack when you make a mistake. Gemma said, motivators are different for different people, i.e. kudos, promotion, salary, food, words, actions, added responsibilities, etc. Oh, I've already flicked on. So Claire sent in a tip. The conversation is the most important part of a one-to-one. The form you complete is just a record. Natalie, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think that's absolutely true, and it's a great way of phrasing it. I think what's key is actually the actions that come out of that conversation. So it's not so much the what, it's the actual how do you do this? How do you put it into practice? What specifically behavioral changes do you want to see? How's that going to work in reality?
Yeah, and Gary, do you think your kind of boost model would help with that?
Yeah, if you look at what was on the boost model, the final one is actions and timeline. So completely agree with what Natalie's just said there. Conversation is brilliant, but the actions that come out of that conversation drive the change.
Fab. So a few more tips. Steve's obviously after the champagne, I think, says consistent performance management is driven by great quality processes. Use your quality monitoring effectively. Regularly review forms and questions. Make sure scoring methods are consistent. Probably last one. Justina says, knowing how and when to investigate the skill versus will when it comes to performance management. Identifying this will determine how to discuss performance going forward. Gary, I think this one's another one, a bit like the one we were discussing before.
Definitely. I think you've got behaviors, you've got skill, and that behavioral piece forms into the will. So actually, everybody's got the potential. We've recruited them and we've hired them to say that we can do this job, and then we've inducted them into the role. So actually balancing that and understanding, is it behavioral or is it a knowledge or a skill, is really key to when it comes to understanding what route to take in performance management.
Yeah, and Natalie, I quite like the skill versus will. What are your thoughts?
I like it too. I just think it misses one big thing, and that's the fact that the performance management fundamentally starts with numbers. And as much as you can look at behaviors, which is all about the art of how we do performance management, really fundamentally, it's much more about the numbers, the scientific approach. Because if we understand our numbers, we know where we're going with performance management. It delivers its purpose. Without it, it is purely just a conversation that's very much often based on instinct, likes and dislikes, rather than the facts of the actual matter, the numbers, the science behind it.
All clarity and expectations, I call that. It's making sure that you know what you're on the hook for.
Fab. So Natalie, I think that goes just into handing over to you. You can see already lots of tips and questions coming through. So I will stop sharing and let you take us through your presentation.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm going to be talking today about performance and performance management, but specifically I want to sit back a little bit and take a bigger picture, a larger view on this. I think in the time that we're actually operating right now, the world has shifted for most of us quite considerably over the last 18 months. So I want to talk a little bit about performance management and hybrid working. I want to talk about value, and I want to talk about future proofing when it comes to performance management. But before I do that, I just want to put some stuff into context, really. I've got a gorgeous twin daughters, and one of my girls is a big climber. And so I've spent many a night at, if you know it, it's White Spider. It's a big climbing outdoor place, watching the climbers climb away. I'm not a climber myself, but what I've noticed over time is that there's one little trick that they all use. And that's this device is called a Bailey. I don't know if anyone else around the panel does climbing. And this device holds together the whole piece for a climber. And I often look at it and I think, and I've got quite a few of them hanging around my house. The top end of it is like the organization, and the bottom end of it is like our advisors, who in turn look after our customers. And this Bailey really is the central piece, which is our management. It's our team leaders, it's our operational managers. And this Bailey makes it all smooth, it makes it controlled, and it makes us progress. When we're climbing up, whether we're climbing up, even climbing down, it helps us as well as moving across and sideways. And every week when I see my daughter climbing, I think, gosh, that really is the role of the manager, moving across with what we're doing. And I think that's the role that we've specifically now got to play, as we are very excitedly now living in the fourth industrial revolution. Whew, can I believe I've just said that? The fourth industrial revolution. This is the revolution that's all about intelligence. It's about taking us further forward. And I don't know about you, but for me, this is a very fast world that we are now operating in. And it's had some real clear impacts for us over this last year, where we've literally flipped our model, haven't we? We've flipped from being phone, email, chat into chat, email, phone. We're seeing phone volumes declining by up to 40% plus. We're seeing organizations put chat at the forefront of the dialogue with our consumers. And I think that changes radically performance management and how we are moving and progressing in our contact center world. And there are 4 key areas that we are really impacting right now. The first one has to be customer experience and how that's shifting. Our customers are ultimately, they've given us some grace over COVID, haven't they? But that's now whittling away very rapidly. The employee agenda has gone right to the top with all the mental health and well-being issues. Again, that's had a different spin for us on how we performance manage. Most of my clients want a better return on investment for their contact center operations. They want to derive better bang for their buck. And technology. Well, I think we've just done digital transformation at the blink of an eye. I think that's all absolutely shifted for each one of us. But what we're now entering is a new era. And that era is the era of the bot. And if there is one thing that is going to shift us quite significantly, it is going to be the bot and what we do when it comes to performance management. So I can see some of you scratching your heads and thinking, why she brought up the bot? Well, I think it's very simple, really. What the bot is doing to us is it is removing our routine work, right? So it's taking away from what we would traditionally performance manage up to 50% of our workload. Stop, pause, breathe. 50% of our workload is disappearing, okay? Now that is instrumentally changing, reimagining right now customer service and our teams and what we are doing today. And we know that over 30% of service organizations are looking to implement a bot within the next 12 months. So the other 70% will definitely do it within the next 2 to 3 years. So what does that mean to me as a manager? It means that how I'm managing today has to, without a shadow of a doubt, change in the next 12 months. It has to significantly change around the conversations I'm having, what's happening with my teams, and how we're behaving with our customers. And we know the bots are going to maximize sales outcomes, they're going to maximize customer experience, but they're also going to drive down cost. And I have to shift what I'm doing as a manager. Otherwise, I am going to be, at the end of the day, a consequence of all of that rather than master of my destiny. And I can have a significant role in shifting what my team are doing, shifting their routine conversations and making sure I'm at the higher end of the scale through what and how I am delivering week in, week out with performance management. And I think that's why I got so passionate at the beginning around what frequency are we doing performance management conversations on? Guys, we have 12 months virtually to turn this around. This IT are all over this. And we're seeing that today where we're seeing a lot of bots going into place, forgive me, Paul, quite badly. And what we've got to do is get that shifted into good stuff so it's better for our people and better for our customers. And there's lots of examples that I could bring to bear, but I'm not going to do that right now because there's one other thing that's really affecting us that we need to understand when it comes to performance. And that's about the hybrid worker. We no longer work in one place. Over 80% of contact centers are now hybrid working. I did a large poll recently and 92% of all responders said that they would be continuing working from home. So we went into hybrid working, we did disaster recovery, we were amazing. Within hours, days, and definitely no longer than a week, we got the whole thing up and running. And we've virtually been operating in that mode ever since. But we know we've got some consequences around employee stress, employee well-being, and we're starting to see the dips in customer satisfaction. We're starting to see some of the consequences of hybrid working. We have to, as a group, as a collective, as an industry, take responsibility for this and get it working for us in a really positive way. And week in, week out, I'm back into that week in, week out at the moment, it's performance management that will enable us to do it, because it's not about performance management if we're going to make it really work for us. It's about performance improvement. Because if your organization is looking to drive down costs, that means not only do they want a better bang for their overall buck, but you've got to get more out of less, more so than ever before. And if you think about the fact that all your transactional routine work is going to disappear, you're going to be dealing with more complex, more high value, more emotive stuff than ever before. And the only tool you really have to deliver it with is performance, because performance is what's going to deliver you even more. I cannot stress it enough right now. I've sat in so many conversations where we're talking about IT taking over the world, and Paul will come onto that. It's more than gamification, this. We are in such an exciting phase in contact centers, more than ever before. We are at the sharp end of this transformation. So what have we got to do? Well, I think there are some answers. It's not just all, I'm not doom and gloom because I think this is so exciting. We've got to deliver sustainable performance. We've got to deliver performance for a bot digital world. And I believe we've got to drive for high performance. We can no longer just accept average. We've got to shift the bar. And I know that every organization I work with can shift the bar because they're already doing it, not with all of their people, but with some of their people. So part of this is to take what the sum of your people are doing, your top performing people, and understand how you can then replicate that. You can cascade it across your whole organization. And you have to do that, understanding the numbers, because we're driven by numbers in our world, and then bring that together with all of the great stuff around communication, around skills, and around behaviors. We have to get on top of this to make it really work. So this model was developed following a lot of research. There's 6 key areas to focus on if you want to deliver high performance. And there are key behavioral step changes. We've already covered off the weekly performance reviews. We've done that already. You know that now. It's what makes the difference between high and low performance. But there are other things as well. There are things like having daily team huddles. Oh, I can hear someone crying. I haven't got the time. I can't do a daily team huddle. A daily team huddle takes no more than 10 minutes, but connecting with your team, engaging, whether that's face-to-face, remote over Zoom, learning the new skills that you'll need to be able to make that happen really incredibly effectively. But you know what? There's another piece of information that we have to bring into this picture. And that's, I mean, it's coming out very loud and clear. There's a real gap between management perception and frontline reality. And they've measured the gap now, and the gap is 23%. So a manager thinks things are 23% better than they are, okay? So whatever you're thinking right now around your teams and what they're doing, your teams are not as engaged as you are. So that's why we need to look at the bigger picture and not just look at performance improvement in isolation. It has to be part of that wider framework of employee engagement, which is part of the wider framework, which is about employee experience and what we call CX, customer experience plus employee experience. So there's a lot there, but the next piece that sits with this jigsaw is about delivering value back to your organizations, understanding the return on investment. So in order to do that, you need to understand your current value, first of all, by customer, by channel, and by employee is really important. Understand what the high performance opportunity is. And once you understand that, you've got the gap, haven't you? You know what you're going to go to, because you have to understand not just the number in its purest sense, but what is the value it delivers back to the organization. And organizations that I've worked with, we know that gap in organizations themselves between low performers and high performers is in the region of about 70%. So imagine a world where you can take your performance as it is today, and I'm not going to say increase it by 70% because everyone says, Natalie, that's too big a stat. Imagine you can just reduce it, or sorry, increase it by 10%, 15%. That is in your gift right now with the teams that you're sitting on. But understand, you have to understand current value, what high performance opportunity is, then create the plan and the glide path. And then you have, bang, weekly performance reviews against that glide path. It works together as a system. It can bring together a whole employee experience that will deliver you performance improvement. So really, we're moving into this new era. We're going into this new world, and it's with us right now. Our role is changing, and it's vital that we take on board this when it comes to the 4th industrial revolution about how we're going to improve performance. And the bottom line isn't the fact that this is a nice thing to do. This is about you have now a chance to do it. And you have to do it for our own jobs, but also the jobs of our advisors. Because by improving performance, you will upskill your teams to deliver more, deliver better, and to deliver faster for your employees and your customers. And I guarantee you that what I've shared with you absolutely works, I promise you. From today, there are 4 key takeaways. Know that you're in a revolution. It's exciting and we're part of it. You've got to find a way to sustain performance within hybrid. It's absolutely mandatory for all of us. Understand real value, and then have a really good, strong, robust framework upon which to work. And there's one final thing. You know what? This whole thing takes courage. And it's the contact center having the courage to go to IT and say, actually, that bot isn't good enough. We have to make it work better for our people. It's the contact center leader that will go to the more senior bosses and say, let's look to the future and let's transform together and embrace with marketing what we're doing. So it is in our gift. You've just got to find the courage. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Natalie. A very passionate thing as always. So now, before I get on to kind of my key takeaways, although you've summarised them anyway, we are coming to our quiz. So I just want to remind everyone that to take part, you do need to be in our chat room. It's callcenterhelper.com/chat. And maybe while you're there, you can share in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about Natalie's presentation? I mean, Natalie, my notebook is now awash with things from your climbing analogy, which I thought was brilliant, you know, with supporting and everything, to, you know, 50% of workload is disappearing, you know, 92% of people are going to continue with working from home, but, you know, there are dips now with stress and mental health. So how do you, you know, I was meaning dips with customer satisfaction and things. And also, you know, just hearing about the 4th industrial revolution, you know, how it impacts so much stuff that goes on in the contact center. So, and also your framework. I mean, you know, it's hard to even summarize. You did it perfectly, so I won't bother. So
that's very kind of you, Rachel. Thank you. You know, we are in such an exciting phase, aren't we? The world is changing around us, and as customer contact professionals, all of us, we are at the forefront. We can drive this change for our customers, our employees, and our organizations.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that. So we are coming now to our quiz. A reminder that the quiz buttons are found in the chat room. These are these A, B, C, D buttons at the bottom. They correspond with the right letter. So, you know, if the answer's A, then you need to click A, and or blue. So let me see if I can switch over to our quiz. So I'm going to press play. So we've got 130 people in the chat room so far. So last chance to take part. It's callcenterhelper.com/chat. There is a bottle of champagne or box of chocolates or Amazon gift card for the winner. So, you know, we're going back to Amazon thinking that we're spending lots of money each week. So delighted. So I'm going to press start. So the first question, I'm going to move that out of the way. True or false, in most contact centers, less than 40% of performance management session is spent on coaching. Is that A, true, or B, false? So you need to press the right button. True or false, in most contact centers, less than 40% of a performance management session is spent on coaching. Is it A, true, or B, false? Last chance. I'm going to press next. So yes, most people getting that one right. It is true. 10% of contact centers spend 60% or more of their time in performance management sessions on coaching, which is highly encouraging. So next, oh, got our leaderboard. Let's see how that goes. Right. Next question. As part of the performance management, what is the most common method of incentivizing advisors? Is it A, individual cash bonuses, B, group or team cash bonuses, C, non-cash bonuses, i.e. spot prizes, or D, time off? So that's as part of performance management, what is the most common method of incentivizing advisors? Is it A, individual cash bonuses, B, group or team cash bonuses, C, non-cash bonuses, i.e. spot prizes, or D, time off? Gonna go next. So yeah, most people getting that one right as well, a little bit more split. The answer was actually C, non-cash bonuses. Over half of contact centers offer non-cash bonuses, including spot prizes, gift incentives, and team experiences. This greatly outweighs each of the other options on the list. Oh, change at the top. Let's see how it goes. Third question. Which of the following practices is least likely to improve call center performance management? Is it A, having a consistent framework, B, offering regular feedback, C, setting clear expectations, or D, chasing metric targets? That's which of the following practices is least likely to improve call center performance management? A, having a consistent framework, B, offering regular feedback, C, setting clear expectations, or D, chasing metric targets. Last chance. And yet most people are getting that one right. The correct answer is D, chasing metric targets. As Goodhart's law states, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So don't chase numbers and forget about business leader and advisor considerations in the process. So, change again at the top. So last question. Which philosopher once said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit"? Was it Aristotle? Was it B, Behavior? C, Plato? Or D, Socrates? Which philosopher once said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit"? Was it Aristotle? Well, A, Aristotle, B, Behavior, C, Plato, or D, Socrates? So last chance. And the actual answer, bit different, was Aristotle. Another great quote from him was that links to performance management is pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. So well done, Liam, for winning our quiz. We will be in, or Liam 9 will be in touch after the webinar to share your prize. So I am going to try and alt-tab my way back. So I'm delighted to hand over to Paul for your presentation. So I will stop sharing and let you share your presentation.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Hopefully my screen's coming through loud and clear.
Yep, perfect.
Brilliant, okay. So yeah, it's been a great webinar so far, great sessions from Gary and from Natalie. I just hope and pray that I can do equally as good as I introduced at the beginning. My name is Paul. I'm the innovation lead for workforce engagement here in EMEA for Genesis. And in Genesis, we believe in the power of people. But don't just take my view for it. Industry analysts also agree that there's a real recognition that great customer experience leads with great customer employee experience too. And like Natalie, we feel that employee engagement is pretty critical in this process. So I'm going to start with a couple of stats myself. No surprise, but fast track 360 concern contact center management around employee engagement. And of course, frontline colleagues are always saying that they'll feel as if they could be treated much better. When we look at this analysis, and we took this from a survey that we did talking to existing or new customers with one of the industry analysts, we asked them what was really important in their next purchase when it came to workforce engagement type technology. And of course, although there are things such as workforce management, perhaps some e-learning, learning and coaching tools on that list, in reality, performance management really came out top. And they felt that it was a strong element within that employee engagement piece. So what pain points do I see when I'm talking to customers who do not have a real good performance management strategy? It's no surprise that we see high attrition when there's little engagement. And ultimately, this always impacts on service level. Quite often, there is a lack of transparency and no single version of the truth, as supervisors try to piece together information from multiple sources. And of course, workflow inefficiencies sometimes hide behind these. And it's pretty fundamental that actually when it comes to trying to get everyone to move in the same direction, when there's a poor performance management strategy or poor performance management tools, these are sometimes hard to achieve. So how does performance management fit in a target operating model? Well, first of all, there needs to be an alignment between colleagues in the company. Of course, we take this for granted when we take on new colleagues and they go through that onboarding process. But sometimes when they get out into the contact center environment, these areas may drift apart, and it's good to keep reminding that there is a common goal that they need to achieve. And some of these things may be around measuring success, such as KPIs, around employee engagement itself, but generally they're around the interaction and understanding the customer's intent. Of course, we like to think that these should be linking back to that onboarding process. And sometimes it's used within segmentation of employees, perhaps between teams or departments. And sometimes we get into finer detail of how we should be creating those performance management metrics. Secondly, what we need to do is make sure that all of this has a common goal of working together. And we like to think that it's about belonging together in that simple drive to give great customer experience. Of course, those interaction outcomes may have a number of areas within them, not just necessarily about the black and white metrics of those interactions, but really about why the customer called in the first place. What were they looking to achieve? Did we solve their problem? Did we help them in any shape or form? And of course, we're using things like voice of the customer, NPS and CSAT to try and find out whether we actually were able to succeed in that process. Voice of the employee is also really important, and more organizations are using this as a temperature gauge to say, actually, how am I feeling about the company that I'm in, or how I'm being managed? And of course, we've got traditional metrics such as quality management, quality assurance, that also come within this process. And lastly, performance management needs to accelerate growth, not just for the individual, but as the organization as a whole. Now, this may include things such as reward and recognition. Now, we've touched on some of those points just a minute ago, but also they need to ensure that they're driving the right behaviors, what we want to see in our organization. And of course, they need to link to things such as learning and coaching tools, because in reality, all of this is one. And I think Gary and kind of Natalie mentioned in a similar vein how the performance management elements are always intrinsically linked. But also what's vitally important is that it's not just the frontline colleague. All operational stakeholders should be included, fully aligned and driving the right performance. They all should have that common goal shared amongst them. And they need the technology that will enable them to share those insights and share that data. And I'm not just thinking about the obvious people such as the supervisor. I'm thinking really around all of the support metrics, the resource planner, the quality analyst, the operational management teams. They all need to be part of that process. So how can technology help? So I'm not going to talk too much about what Genesis does, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit around what we would normally recommend for organizations. The first thing is really about self-service. It's not good waiting for my supervisor to come in many hours after I started work today, whilst I've got to wait for them to give me my statistics about how I performed yesterday or even last week. Ideally, I want to look myself. And by looking at myself, I may have a vision of how I'm doing against my peers. All these things, of course, are there to try and give me a steer if I'm going in the right direction. And if I can make those minor adjustments along the way, then it's an easier conversation in my next quality review or my next performance review. Ideally, it needs to be in a single pane of glass. So often I talk to organizations and they say, well, actually, I've got 15 different systems that I need to go to, whether it's my telephony statistics, my sales statistics, my customer complaint handling tools. Ideally, they just need to be in a single place. So much easier for employees just to go to that single page and understand exactly what it is and where they need to be performing. And simple scoring. And very often we look at some of the ways that KPIs are created, And sometimes even I don't understand fully what those KPIs are trying to tell that frontline employee. So simple scoring makes things easy to understand, but also helps bring in things such as gamification, because actually those points mean prizes. Perhaps that may not be a prize, but it may be something that they could work towards. And definitely gamification comes into that personalization process. Leaderboards and peer group analysis is fantastic, but obviously we always make sure that it's used in its most appropriate way and in consideration. We don't want to make sure that people feel vindicated for poor performance. It's always got to be a positive and a reconfirming action. And link it wherever you can to anything else that's included within that process. As I mentioned earlier, onboarding is critical, but also simple things like workforce management and quality management may be linked because of some of those KPIs that you're trying to track. Link it to an e-learning or a coaching module, but there's loads more that you can also do. So the world's really your oyster when it comes to technology. And so my final thoughts around this process. Performance management is a great way to encourage frontline colleagues, and it works hand in hand with workforce transformation strategies. So if you're thinking about a transformation in your organization, don't be afraid to think about performance management and how that could drive those right behaviors and the right culture. Frontline colleagues are our greatest asset. Give them the tools that they need to drive that performance. Let them do what they do best, and let the technology support them. Don't let the technology rule your decision process. There is great tools out there that supports performance management, gamification, and that entire workforce employee engagement piece. Go and unleash the power of people. It's been a great session, and thank you very much, Rachel, for inviting me on.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Brilliant presentation again. I'm going to put up a quick poll and ask, would you like to see a demonstration of the Genesis solution to hear more? So please vote now. Paul, some brilliant takeaways, the power of the people. I love a stat. So, 71% of executives say employee engagement is critical to company success. 69% of employees say they would work harder if better appreciated. Engaged employees are essential to customer service ambitions and customer experience. A brilliant quote. And I think to end, let humans do what they do best and let technology fill in the gaps. I think that perfectly summarizes your presentation. So thank you very much for sharing that.
No
problem. So the chat room has been buzzing. Hopefully we can get through a lot. So let's see what happens. Going to whiz through. So Holly has said, prior to your one-to-ones, fill out a coaching form, what they have achieved, what's going well, any challenges, and what they want to discuss to make sure you both get the best out of the session. Georgiana says, find the trends when it comes to productivity and try to apply the same strategy for all the agents. Gary, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think for me, each person's different. So the same strategy for all agents might not work well for some. So I would say find what works well for the people that you're managing, but have a consistent framework that you can work to where you've identified that particular framework works well for you.
Yeah. So we've had an opinion in that says that at the beginning of each one-to-one, we ask the officers to name 3 things they've done in the last month, which they're proud of. This leads into a nice and positive start of the meeting. Natalie, I think this one's, a great kind of way of starting things.
Yeah, it is. It really helps to kind of get that perspective on things. I would also say to the manager to take responsibility to also offer 3 things that you've seen that they've done well, because pinpointed specific feedback from a manager is always hugely valuable. And that, the point that was said earlier on about giving praise and that people appreciate the praise, fact that you've noticed some of the finite detail that people have actually done is brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. So we've had a question in from Lee, who said, is it fair to say the fact that performance management in many centres lacks consistency the main problem, i.e. team leaders saying things like, I need to start managing their performance? Should it not be a continuous and evolutionary process? Paula, you're nodding along.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it almost comes back to what Gary said at the beginning about those two elements of how you're going to performance manage. Is it an encouraging regular check, or actually, oh, I don't need to manage their performance now because you've noticed that something is bad?
Yeah. Gary, I definitely agree.
Yeah, it's consistency. I think having a clear outline, when does it happen, what scenarios, what's the important things that we measure, and having all those things outlined and clearly mapped out helps a team leader have a more consistent approach to performance management, and helps people feel like they're being consistently managed at the same time. So you don't get these, I've been unfairly treated, or I'm being treated differently. So it avoids those awkward conversations as well.
I think it's also a skills issue. I'm coming back to it on this one because, you know, lots of team leaders, before they started being team leaders, they were still down in the pub on a Friday night with their friends, right? And so actually to take the shift up to suddenly to manage performance is a big leap in terms of skills, but it's also around results as well. So if you feel like every time you meet with someone, you're basically criticizing and just telling them what to do, that's not what it's about. Do it weekly, progress track performance through your stats, see what it's achieving. It's like putting money in your bank balance. If you keep putting it in every week, you see the benefit. And that's how performance improvement rather than management should be working.
So we've had a question in from Kelly, who said behaviours for performance management are often subjective. So how can that be fairly and effectively measured, especially if the behaviour doesn't improve? Natalie, you're nodding. I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, you have to link behaviours to numbers, right? We know the art of behaviours. We've got to know the science of behaviours. So what is the number that's driving the behavior, or the behavior that's being driven by the number? So it's not subjective. It should be there in black and white to us. And through that behavior, we see it in employee retention, we see it in employee satisfaction, and we see it in customer experience and bottom line results. Behavior in isolation is just a party. It's just fun. Behaviors have to be linked to where we're going with purpose in a business.
Yeah, Gary, you were nodding along with it.
Role clarity and expectations. I said it earlier. If I'm clear what's expected of me, and you're inspecting what you expect of me, you'll definitely make more progress than you would than not.
So Carolyn sent in a tip saying, diary in sessions for discovery and feedback. Too many times I get to the end of a week and have to try and fit things in that could have been done with more forward planning.
Great tip.
So Rob Bell has said, remember, change is a process, not an end goal. It can be too easy to declare a loss or a victory too soon. Whizzing through these. Aaron said, if you're assessing a small number of contacts a month, remember that this may be the tip of the iceberg as far as the performance of the advisor. Hopefully time for a few more. Liam said, find solutions, not problems. Oh, I think I've read that one. Lindsay says, I always try to drive the employee to create the action versus telling them what it should be. And I think we've got time for one more question. Do you have any advice to drive positive attitude within someone who's a fairly negative person? Paul, what are your thoughts on this one?
It could be quite a challenge to have someone who's very negative within the team. What I've always tried to do in those scenarios personally is to try and find something that I can get them to be a leader of, whether it's an opinion or whether it's an action. You know, try and convert that into something positive, and so therefore you're emphasizing the positive that they could make in the team rather than the negative that they're having. So but it is a very tricky one, and it does really depend on what the scenario is.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, unfortunately, you can see all the tips that I've got. So unfortunately, we have reached the top of the hour. So we'd like to ask if you could write in the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? Their winning tip comes from Lindsay too. saying root cause is extremely important. Use questions to understand why the issue is occurring. Often you'll find it's not the individual, and it is in fact our tools and processes are lacking. So congratulations, we will be in touch after the webinar. A reminder that we have a survey when you leave the webinar. If you could fill that one in, it's only 4 questions long. The recording will be available later on this afternoon, and we are back next week with chat and email mistakes to avoid. So join us then. But I'd just like to say thank you so much to our 3 brilliant speakers today. To Gary Gormley, thank you for being fab. I'm going to end on that. Thank you very much. Natalie Calvert, brilliant to have you on board again. And to Paul Turner from Genesis, thank you so much for all your insight as well. Brilliant. And I will see you all next week. Thank you very much all. Bye.
Take care. See you again, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.